Hello, everyone, and welcome to Singularity Podcast. Singularity Podcast is a feature of Singularity weblog where you can go and download it or watch it in full. My name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and today my guest is Douglas Rushkoff. Douglas Rushkoff is an author, teacher, and documentarian who focuses on the ways people, cultures, and institutions create, share, and influence each other's values. Douglas teaches media studies at New York University, serves as technology columnist for the Daily Beast, and lectures around the world. His new book, Program or Be Programmed 10 Commands for the Digital Age, is a follow up of his frontline documentary, Digital Nation. His previous book was called Life Incorporated and was also made into a short, award winning film. Douglas has 10 best selling books on new media and popular culture, which have been translated to over 30 languages. They include titles such as Siberia, Media Virus, Playing the Future, Nothing Sacred, Get Back in the Box, and Coercion. Douglas has also written and hosted 3 award winning frontline documentaries called The Merchants of Cool, The Persuaders, and most recently, Digital Nation. So without further ado, let me say welcome to Douglas Rushkoff.
Hi, it's good to be with you.
Thank you for being here, Douglas. Let's start the interview with a little bit more personal background information on you, if you don't mind. And I'm interested in finding out what was your maybe education and your start towards being interested in technology and the way it changes culture and society.
Um, I guess, as a young person, I was always interested in science and theater, and I was never sure whether I wanted to be a theater director or a medical doctor. And people thought of these two fields as very different from each other. And for me, they were really the same thing. What I was interested in was what animates life. In other words, what makes something alive. And maybe in medicine, it's obvious, although most doctors weren't that concerned with it. I was very interested in what makes a person or a cell living. Where's the line between an inanimate object and a living one? How much autonomy does something need to be considered alive? How much self-preservation? Where do we cross into that? And why is it so very obvious to us as people when someone's alive or not? Yet it's so hard, kind of on a theoretical level, to really establish what that is. And then on the theater side, it's very much the same thing. As when does a person just saying these words from a script and moving around on a stage, when does that recreation cross over and become something emotionally real, either for the audience or for the actor? When does pretending overtake the real? Because they've done studies on actors. If you have a part of a character that kills themselves every night in a play, you end up with those negative, depressed hormones kind of going through your body. So I was interested in those two things, and then in college, I found that my most psychedelic friends, my most kind of strange intellectual, um, but very countercultural friends, had ended up becoming very interested in technology and computers, and that seemed strange to me because I had always known my best computer friends and programmers were more geeky, more like mathematics people, from my elementary school or high school. They weren't these very artsy and strange people. So I spent some time going to California and looking at what these people were doing. And I wrote some articles about, the beginning of fractals and virtual reality and some of the beginnings of networking and computer gaming. And ended up almost accidentally becoming really one of the only journalists covering this new cyberdelic culture. And then so that turned into writing books and thinking about media, and that's sort of how it all came around. That I'm not interested in technology, I suppose, as much as media, and how
Hmm.
do human beings transmit values to one another? How does something that I believe become something that you believe? And what is that? And how does that process work? And how is that process changed depending on where it takes place?
But if the media is the message, then by definition, you will definitely be interested in technology because it overtakes any luggage or charge that the message originally could have had, and potentially replaces it with its own, doesn't it?
It can, but I think the problem with seeing the media as the message is then sometimes you can forget that there's another person or another institution
Hmm.
behind that medium. So while the medium of Facebook may be the message of the way it works, there's a company, there's a guy, there are people trying to make money off that medium. So the
Hmm.
medium may be the message, but the medium itself is an agenda, and it's embedded with the with the wants or the desires of the people who've programmed it, or the people who've paid those programmers.
Hmm. Okay, so let me ask you then, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a sociologist, as a journalist, as a writer, as a teacher, as a documentary filmmaker?
I don't know. The problem, if I once I try to put one of those labels on myself, I usually feel inadequate, because then I look at other ones. If I say, "Oh, I'm a documentary maker," then I look at Michael Moore and say, "Oh, well, he's a better documentarian than I am." Or if I'm a writer, then I look at someone else and say, "Oh, he's a better writer." I'm kind of just me, doing a particular thing. I'm a I'm a person who's trying to help um, articulate the concerns that many people have,
Hmm.
and I'm trying to help people um, contend with some of the rapid change going on. I'm trying to help people, um, you know, uh, hang on to what we would call their agency, their awareness. I'm trying to help people um, act consciously and with purpose in an increasingly bewildering world.
Well, your most recent book is called Program or Be Programmed: 10 Commands for a Digital Age. And I was recently posting a blog article about it and was comparing it to Tron.
Hmm.
And my line of approach was that, well, in Tron, everything that Douglas Rushkoff says makes sense. I mean, there's two people, there's programmers and there's programs. So the programmers are gods, and the programs are just merely marionettes. And you're either programmed or you're programming. There's
Uh-huh.
no in between. But how is that going to apply in the real world? Maybe you could give us a brief overview of your argument.
Well, it's harder to give an overview. I mean, because it took me a whole book to say it. It's harder to do an overview than maybe just an example.
Hmm.
So, if you're a young person and you use Facebook to socialize, um, if you don't know really how Facebook works, I mean, you know how to click on the buttons, you
Yeah.
know how to say, I like this, I don't like this, I do like him, I don't like her.
Hmm.
Here's my favorite books, here's my favorite movies. If you use this as your interface to the world, if you understand yourself in terms of your Facebook profile, if your Facebook profile becomes your mirror instead of the mirror on the wall, right? If you use it as your understanding of who you are, then what you think you are, then the way you identify yourself, the way you think of yourself is changing, right? It's changing based on what the people programming Facebook want you to think. Right now, the people at Facebook want you to think of yourself in terms of your consumer choices. They want you to think of yourself in terms that help them sell you and your information to advertisers. They are encouraging you to think and behave in ways that help them make money. It's not to say they're bad. It's nothing to do with good or bad. This is not morals. It's just a specific world, right? Facebook is a specific world programmed in a certain way to lead you to think about yourself in certain ways. So if you don't understand that that's happening, if you accept what they're doing at face value, if you decide to interact to your world and with your world as a Facebook person, then you are quite literally being programmed by Facebook to think of yourself and your world in a different way. Again, I'm not saying it's bad. It may
Mm-hmm.
be that it's better to think of ourselves that way. Maybe the economy needs it. Maybe, I obviously don't personally agree with it, but maybe that is the future, and we should stop thinking of ourselves in terms of, our participation in society or our empathy with other people or how we behave in the real world. Maybe the way that we're going to get by as a civilization is for people to think of themselves in terms of their likes and their dislikes and how far they've gotten on certain video games or how many people they've gotten to click on something.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to at least understand that operating in that world changes the way we look at ourselves and other people.
So, in other words, coming back to our world, what you're saying is that our world runs its own specific code. It has its own sort of modus operandi, its own operating system, and its own biases. And for better or for worse, it would help us if we are aware of those and of the ways that they impact us.
Right. I would think it's certainly going to be for better um, to know some of this.
Mm-hmm.
That to be conscious. I mean, there are many smart people who have argued that people really are just too stupid to understand any of this. There was a great argument in the United States between Walter Lippmann, who's the really the father of propaganda. We wouldn't have had, the Communist Party or the Nazi movement or capitalism as an ideology without Walter Lippmann. He understood um, how to make ideas sell, and
Mm-hmm.
and he really invented the notion of ideologies. But his belief was that the masses really are just too stupid to govern themselves, and that they just can't be trusted with anything approaching democracy. So what you do is you create the illusion of democracy. You get a few elite benevolent people to run the government or the world, and then you get good public relations people to convince people that this is the best thing for them. While this other guy who believed in education, John Dewey, he invented the Dewey Decimal System and libraries and
Mm-hmm.
education. He thought, no, 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 that democracy is possible. All you need is some basic education
Yeah.
so that people can understand how the world works and then make intelligent decisions about it. And they argued back and forth for 30 or 40 years. And there's something to be said for both sides of the argument. Maybe people are, if not too stupid, just too lazy and don't want to know. They would rather trust someone to make everything okay. Um, and I would like to agree with that and just trust in Daddy or some leader or Obama or somebody to take care of everything. But you really right now, I think we can't. I do think that more of us do have to be involved. I don't trust Zuckerberg and Facebook to create a reality that's really going to serve humanity's best interests. So I do think we have to learn something about how these different environments that we're living in, how they're constructed, how they're sloped towards certain behaviors or other ones. And if we don't, um, we really do risk giving away our awareness, our consciousness to people who don't deserve our trust.
But doesn't that then raise the question of why publishing a book? I mean, isn't that basically in perfect following with your own message that publishing a book is one step behind the medium of the current age? I mean, wouldn't it have been better if you programmed uh, a video game or a social network of a sort, or something being programmed, so in this way you are in keeping and one step ahead of the game, or at least in sync rather than behind with the old medium of publishing?
Well, the problem is that people do not know how to read programs. So you can't really communicate to people through programs. You can just have them enter into your world. So, no, I'm not competing with the other elites to create a more beneficial program.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to do is to educate humans as to the nature of programming. And the only way really to communicate effectively is in a medium where they understand the medium, where they in text at least, people still have the ability to write. So when they read, they can assume a an intellectual posture. They can assume an active posture when they read, whereas in digital technologies so far they can't. Unless I'm communicating with other programmers, I can't communicate these ideas through a program.
Mm-hmm.
I could do it maybe in a game, and show a game and have a lesson and hear people who don't know how to program or don't know anything about programming end up, zombies and all that. And that's fine. But I'm a writer, and I don't think that just as here we are talking, I don't think that your podcast is obsolete just because it's using dialogue and video any more that I think that writing a book or an ebook, and which it is, ebooks are on the rise. Interestingly enough, text is not dead. Text is just being reinvented in a new medium. But no, not everything has to be not everything has to be a program, or not all programming has to be competitively positioned.
Well, but in a world where we have more and more sophisticated programming, let me see if I can connect this to the technological singularity and the rise of artificial intelligence, or at least potentially the rise of artificial intelligence. In a world in which we have more and more sophisticated programming and better and more powerful hardware running that programming, what would the impact be on the both on society and on your motto, sort of program or be programmed? I mean, there comes a point in which the program itself starts reprogramming itself and self-improving itself.
Right.
What happens then? What do you think would be? I mean, first of all, do you see that as a feasible possibility or not?
Oh yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, you've got, between robotics, genetics,
Mm-hmm.
nano, and digital programming, you have really four technologies that are capable of improving and replicating. And they will. And the more they self-improve and self-replicate, the more likely it is that they will begin to experience desire. That there's going to experience, what Kevin Kelly would call wants.
Mm-hmm.
They will want to survive, um, and that's not a problem. I just think that it would be more likely that even if computers surpassed us in terms of their ability to sustain themselves, their abilities to think, if they surpassed us on many levels, then we have to start wondering, well, why would computers want to keep us around at all, right? How do we then enhance the survivability of computers, right? And we would do that by being very, very human, and we have to look at, well, what do human beings have? What we have is agency. What we have is awareness. What we have is the ability to see the big picture. What we have the ability to do is to contextualize and recontextualize. If we decide to surrender our awareness to programs, you're right, then they wouldn't need us at all. Then we may as well look at ourselves as a temporary phase in the evolution of matter towards greater complexity. But if instead we can embrace our own cognitive abilities, embrace our agency, then we can at the very least be partners with technology in the ongoing quest to combat entropy with complexity. But right now, as I look at people interacting with machines, I see us making our technologies more complex and making ourselves more simple. As we just bang on glass iPads,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't see us um, I don't see us becoming, even active partners in the programming of our future. I see us having a few people capable of teaching computers how to program themselves, and then being left to turn off the lights when it's done.
Yeah, because precisely that the issue is, what about the moment in which the programmers would be all machines?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that mean then that we are all going to be programmed? Because right now they may be elites, but at least those programmers belong to our own species,
I
so
know.
to speak. And what happens when those entities do not belong to our own species, but are the ones who are programming? And then we are the ones being programmed instead of what was previously the case. The opposite case was previously true.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's what I'm arguing about in the book. That um, if we don't learn programming to some extent, then right, we'll be surrendering our experience, our reality, not just to the elite, but to a mechanical elite, to an elite that's not even human. And while some listeners may say that is better, that uh, uh, I'd rather surrender my future, my children's future, to a benevolent machine than to a potentially evil person. We don't know. We don't know what those machines will be like. It's very hard. It's very hard to develop a program that can foresee all the changes in circumstances. It's really hard to do. You develop a program and you think you've taken everything into account, and you haven't. And if the machine is reprogramming itself, then it's reprogramming itself um, based on partial evidence, based on only some of the picture. And if we've left something out, some important things, it becomes too late to influence the program. Which is why I want people to, even if they can't program in C++, to at least um, come to understand the biases of the different technologies they're using, and become more able to determine when a program is um, working with them or against them.
Mm-hmm. So do you yourself then do any programming whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not actively programming now because there's just people who are better at it um, than I am. Um, but I'm aware of programming. I'm aware of what's possible and what's not. I'm aware when the way a program is behaving is because it's just a pre-existing condition of nature, or because this is how how some people have decided to make it. When I talk to kids who are using these interfaces, they think that this is just the way computers are. They don't understand, they don't seem to recognize that this is the way a certain group of people have decided to make them. And that's really the key insight that I'm trying to the hump that I'm trying to get people over. It's just for them to see really that much, and I'll consider myself having won.
So, what would be the benchmark of it? What would be the sign of that awareness?
Um, in some, it would be people turning towards um, the kinds of technologies and interfaces that make their lives better. If you know, if we decided to, if people began migrating from, say, Facebook to a a decentralized client-based social networking software, like one that some students at NYU are trying to develop, um, then I would think, oh, good, people get it, and people understand that even if a certain system seems to have less features on it than another one, they understand that in the long term, they're they're adopting a system which is going to be, a heck of a lot, uh, uh, you know, better for them, and offer them more of a future than than some of the stuff they're using now. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, every time we migrate from one of these big social networking things to another one, I see that as a positive sign that things haven't become so entrenched that
Hmm.
people are afraid to move. I would love to see, after Steve Jobs dies or whatever, I would love to see people um, adopting something like Linux. Moving into you know
Open source.
Yeah, something, people unwilling to just surrender their authority over their devices to AT&T or to Apple. I would love to see that appetite for um, for self-modification, and that refusal to just submit blindly to the way they want us to use our stuff, and go, oh, well, I guess that's just it. No, I really, I want to see people fight for um, the abilities that are actually embedded in their tools.
Let me see if I can take your argument just one step further, though. Um, Technology seems to be acting as that sort of a element which throws the established, the entrenched, dominating media into sort of an anarchic situation in which new uh, things spring up, be it Facebook or Twitter, and in that sense, I think maybe I think that's the reason why you're optimistic and you see that as a good sign. But what about biology? I mean, our biology has a lot of biases itself. It creates a number of ways that we perceive and look at the world and our own mortality too, which are sort of ingrained and come together with our biology. So the argument goes that if we're able to overcome biology via technology, then we'll be able to overcome those historic millennia old biases and be able to move to the next step of evolution, which would be even more liberating and would allow us to be even freer at the programming result. In other words,
Sure, sure, as long as we're aware. As long as we're aware of what we're doing and the choices involved, go for it. Um, you know, right now, I think by understanding digital technology, I think so far digital simulations and digital biases
mhm.
are louder and more limiting and oversimplifying than biological ones,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you say, okay, we've got these biological biases, therefore, men are going to get violent, unnecessarily in these situations, or we're biased towards tribalism and certain kinds of prejudice, and if you see someone with a different color skin, no matter how anti-racist you think you are, you may have some biological predisposition, say, to hating that person because, on an evolutionary level, you were supposed to be suspicious of people, from different tribes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then you think, okay, I can have digital technology to recognize people and to look at people through these lenses. So then that program won't be activated, that genetic suspicion program. That's all fine and good, but right now, anyway, the the impact of digital biases um, seem to be less recognized than the biases that we have. The
Mm-hmm.
strategy that humans have been working with is to try to overcome, our prejudices and our biases um, um, by becoming more aware of them. And I feel like right now, anyway, the leap to digital digital perception and digital cognition would be premature, especially when we haven't come to recognize the biases of digital media. So I feel like it would just start all over again from an earlier level or a younger level of development. Not that we can't do it long term and look at it, but it just I want us, if we're gonna do it, then let's do this. Let's do this consciously. Let's do this with as many people working and thinking actively in this new media as possible, rather than just being told, okay, this is the next place we're going as a species. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Or even not even knowing. I feel like for the most part, we're migrating without even people knowing they're moving.
So in that sense, then, would you agree that we are moving towards a kind of a singularity, or towards some kind of a coexistence, or giving birth to an artificial intelligence potentially?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things do feel like inevitabilities, and that's likely one of them. These are um, I know that they're I don't think that they're aware yet, but I do think of consciousness or thinking as more of an emergent phenomenon
Mm-hmm.
than an essential or an intrinsic one. And I do think that once our technologies have reached a certain a sufficient level of development and complexity, I don't see what would be stopping them from from getting there. Um, and it's at that point, really, it's just a matter of whether they if they get better at it than we are. It's whether they accept us as partners in you know in the continuing evolution of matter towards greater complexity. I hope they do, because I think that there's some terrific things about the biologic reality, but um, it's going to be up to us as people to know what they are, and to see what's the difference between one thing or another. I think if we just
Well, mortality being one of the major ones, I think, and the other, the capacity for superintelligence.
yeah, or
So
you mean
to
their superiority to us?
Yes, yes, because
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there may be a few probiology biases, as you say, but I mean, looking at our own mortality and looking at the limits of our own intelligence, wouldn't we be more inclined to uh, forego those probiology biases and simply embrace the new medium as an existence medium? Like the
Um,
digital medium as the existence medium in which we uh, exist in one shape or form or another.
I don't know. I'm into diversity. Um, so I would love to see everything coexisting. Some people can go there, decide they want to, live forever, or do what they think of as living forever, and go go some cyborg route. And other people decide, no, I want to be a bio person and go this way. Um, I think the more we recognize the strengths and weaknesses of various forms of existence and cognition, the more variety we will embrace as a result.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I know you're limited on time, so let me just ask you the last two
That's
brief.
the topic of our conversation. We're all limited in time for the time being, right?
Very much so, yes, indeed. Uh, so, if there's one message that you would like to send or to give to our listeners today at Singularity Weblog, what do you want that message to be?
Well, I guess it depends. I mean, if we're looking at an audience that's particularly uh, interested in, and in some cases enamored of uh, of the singularity and the
Mm-hmm.
future of
Yeah.
intelligent technology. Um, I guess I would say a few things. I mean, one is um, we gotta be careful what we wish for. What we're talking about here, and maybe the Ray Kurzweil vision of um, of a I don't know what we would call it, a kind of a digital future. It may be closer than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
That this is no longer a theory. It's kind of a reality, and that doesn't mean that it's as science fiction or as strange as we think it needs to look for this to actually be happening.
But
That
the question is about the implications, though. Wouldn't the implications be equally radical and fundamental on us?
Yes, um, but I would argue for the most part invisible. We are not, unless we really learn what's going on from both sides, then the singularity is going to be something that happens to us, not something that we do. And as I look at I the current trajectory, and I'm not saying this to be sad, but I see people getting dumber as their machines get smarter. And I don't think it has to be that way. I think I think all intelligence could be going up, our intelligence and our machine's intelligence. And I don't think it's an either or. But
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of my concern.
Yeah, I mean, that was the concern of the Unabomber, too, by the way. He was seeing us getting dumber and dumber and the machines getting more and more in control of our own society
Right. But he
until.
saw it as an either or also. He said, okay, so we
Exactly.
have to go the other way.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that we celebrate and push technology so far, and I don't think it's that we avoid technology and shun it. I think it's that we use it consciously, that we humans embed technology with our purpose. That is the way we live on.
So you don't think that technology would necessarily replace and supplement biology, but it may actually enhance it and coexist with it and be sort of infused by meaning from biology?
Right. At least we push it off that way, with meaning, and meaning other than capitalism, meaning other
Hmm.
than the BS that is standing in for meaning right now.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's very interesting. That's a very debatable point by many of our guests here, but it's a worthwhile point, and I really appreciate you being here today to put it forward.
Oh, thanks a lot.